Welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Romans chapter 5, and Paul is giving us a clear understanding of the inner operations of salvation. Like, why do we need to be saved? The spiritual condition of man. So I'm going to jump right to it. Romans chapter 5, and then I'm going to resist the urge of going back but I will start going back and doing backup, but I will start back at verse 12 where he starts his thought. So he said, therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man and death through sin, in this way death spread to all men because all sinned. In fact, sin was in the world before the law, and sin was not charged to a person's account where there was no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses even over those who did not sin in Adam's likeness and transgression. Now, this phrase, even those who did not sin, and notice what he says, the reason why that's a moot point, because they're still dead in sin. They're still separated from God. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who did not sin in the likeness of Adam's transgression. He's a prototype of the coming one. More on that later. But the gift is not like the trespass. So we left off kind of talking about the difference between the gift and grace. And I want to kind of elaborate so we always are cognitive of what the word here that's being used. The word gift and grace come from the same family of words, meaning the bestowing of favor without considering how good or the merit. In other words, the textbook definition of grace is God's unmerited favor. That's just a simple textbook. However, to go deeper, what is unmerited means, and then what is the favor? Well, in order to understand the favor, you have to understand when it says that God's unmerited favor, meaning that God is the gift is the bestowing of, out of the goodness of God's heart. He does us good. And he does that without accounting if we are good enough to receive the good that he has bestowed upon us. That's extremely important, because if you were to add anything to that, in fact, let me go to Romans. I'm going to do this as a shortcut because I don't want to scroll through. I won't lose my place. But Romans chapter 11. I could scroll through there, but I'm already committed. All right. Romans chapter 11. Or do I want Romans chapter 10? Let's try 11 first and let me see. Here, yes. So Romans chapter 10, Paul is really talking about, again, he's talking about the law. He's talking about Israel. And he's really talking about in chapters 9, 10, 11, which we will get to down the road. But the contrast, of course, is Israel's attempt to obtain God's righteousness through the law, through obeying the commandments of the law. So he said, verse 5, in the same way, then, there is also at the present time a remnant chosen by grace. And then he says, now, if by grace, then it is not by works. Otherwise, grace ceases to be grace. And I want to just bring that point out, that if you don't understand that the gift what Paul is stressing is that what Jesus accomplished for us is a gift. And yet there are so many people that think that there is something they must do in order to earn their way. That they think there's something they must do to either get saved and or stay saved. And as he said, if it's work, it is something something human effort, right? If you think that you have to do something by means of human effort, now let's plug that in. Human effort. I have to do good deeds, good works, live holy, live according to the law, live according to my denominational rules, whatever. Human effort. Then, as Paul said there, it's not grace. But what is he stressing here? The gift is not like the trespass. So the gift of salvation, which comes through grace, the gift, and then this gift, the fact that it is a gift, and we can use it in human terms, that if you ever received a gift, and then someone says, yeah, but in order for you to receive this gift, you have to do such and such. It is not a gift. No matter what they're other than receive, right? If you know, if you and again, our recollection of this, because so many times that word is compromised. The word gift is used compromised. You know, politicians receive gifts, but they receive gifts for favors, right? That's just a life of politicians or the political rank. I mean, I work for a government, and I cannot accept gifts in exchange for favors. Not only could I be fired, but I could be prosecuted and go to jail. In fact, there are several congressmen right now that are under indictment for that very reason. Okay. So the idea of gift, then, that's what it is. So he's using the term gifts. He says, but the gift is not like the trespass. So then he goes on, for if by one man's trespass the many died, how much more have the grace of God and the gift overflowed to many by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ. So what is this grace? Remember, it is out of God's goodness. Then you can say out of his resources. By the way, the favor is what good he's doing. And he's doing it for free. But it's important to understand that not only is he doing it for free, right? That it is more than that. Because you can do something for free and not mean it. Okay, here, just give it. But God's grace is he is doing it for free out of the goodness of his heart because he wants to do us good. That's important. And in this case, it is salvation. Man was dead in trespasses and sin, hopelessly lost in his sin. Man is hopelessly lost. Man could not in any way earn his way out of his hopelessness. He could not. Now, if we go back, this should help. In verse 6, this should help bring to light what Paul is saying here. Verse 6, for while we were still helpless at the appointed time. While we were still helpless at the appointed time. I want to read this to see from another translation. Let me see here. I just want to read this. 5 verse 6. So this is the King James Bible. For when we were yet without strength, in due time Christ died for us. I want us to get the picture of this. Let me see. Let's see. The New English Translation. All right, the New English Translation says, it says, "For while we were still helpless, at the right time Christ died for us." And then, where is the New King James? The New American Standard Version. I'll try this one too. Yeah, it's gonna take me too much time. Let me see if we got. All right. All right. So, verse 6. It says, "For we were yet weak in due season, Christ died for us." So, we see different translations. They convey pretty much the same thought, right? They conveyed the same thought. While we were still helpless, right, hopelessly lost in our sin, Christ died for us. All right, so this is the gift. Right here is defining grace. Right here, this is defining grace. For while we were still helpless at the point in time, Christ died for the ungodly. See, that's the grace, which is the unmerited, right? We were helpless. So the unmerited is we were helpless. Christ died for the ungodly, and that's the favor. Died for the ungodly. Right? So that's grace, you could say, defined. Now, verse 15 again says, "So, but the gift is not like the trespass, for if by the one man's trespass the many died, how much more have the grace of God and the gift overflowed to the many by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ." Now look at verse 16. "And the gift is not like the one man's sin, because from one sin came judgment, resulting in condemnation." So again, as I often say, when I get to heaven, if the Lord permits, I got questions for Adam. Why, Adam? Because he was in life, but that his act of sin produced this consequence of judgment and condemnation. So the gift is not like the one man's sin, because from one sin came the judgment. This is incredible revelation, by the way, especially if you are a religious-minded person, because no matter what the denomination, and again, all denominations teach some form of you have to earn your salvation. Some form, some way. You have to do something. And yet, it's not because of you in the first place. It's not your actions that put you in this state of condemnation. And it is certainly not your actions that's going to get you out of condemnation. So he says, since by and the gift is not like the one man's sin, because from one sin came the judgment, resulting in condemnation, but from many trespasses came the gift, resulting in justification. So one man's sin, one man's act of righteousness. Verse 17, "Since by one man's trespass death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive the overflow of grace and the gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ?" So since by one man's trespass, notice it's death reigned. So in other words, your state of condemnation, your state of being separated from God, did not come because of any particular act that you did. His sin was passed on to you by birth, and now you have this sin nature. That's why I say we have a sin nature. Everyone from Adam had a sin nature. So the difference between us, everyone, meaning every single human being, since Adam and Eve. The difference between the whole of humanity and then Adam and Eve, that Adam and Eve, they chose to sin. They chose death. We didn't choose death. They chose death. They 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 chose it, and that's why I said, got questions for Adam, if the Lord permits. So now you're in this state because of what Adam did. And no amount of good deeds, holy living, could reverse that. So even if it was possible, which by the way is not, because your sin nature, it's impossible for man to live right under his sin nature. But that is the delusion of those who think they can do enough good deeds. But even if you could, at the end of that, you still would be like, you're dead in sin. I often tell the story about, from time to time I'll see these outrageous funerals. Let's say of a drug dealer, right? Big time drug dealer who was gunned down. And so they would dress him up in one of the most expensive suits that a drug dealer is known to wear. They put all kinds of expensive bling on him. I've seen one even where they put $100 bills between his fingers. His hands were propped up like this and $100. Okay. But here's the thing. Though he looked like a gangster with a nice bling and gangster suit on, nice hat, whatever, right? He was still dead. All of that, he's still dead. Verse 18 says, so then, as though, so then as through one trespass there is condemnation for everyone, so also through one righteous act there is life-giving justification for everyone. For just as through one man's disobedience the many were made sinners, so also through the one man's obedience the many will be made righteous. And then he said, the law came along to multiply the trespass. Understand that the law only gave knowledge to sin. That's all the law did. It did not give life. The law did not even give you the how to overcome. It just, here's sin, and then it energized that sin in you. The law came along to multiply the trespass, but where sin multiplied, grace multiplied even more, so that just as sin reigned in death, so also grace will reign through righteousness, resulting in eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. So here we see this, again, Paul breaking down the state, the condition, the spiritual condition of man and the spiritual state. How do we overcome that? Through the act of Jesus, and that's important. So you know what? Let me close out this with one of my favorite verses. And let me close this out. Colossians chapter 1, verse 21 says, once you were alienated and hostile in your minds because of your evil actions. So that's our state, right? That's because of one man, sin, we were alienated and then hostile. But now he has reconciled you by his physical body through his death to present you holy, faultless, and blameless before him. So, and of course, when we say it all falls to Jesus, we're not being hyperbole. Jesus, you cannot earn your way, and truthfully, you don't want to if you ever come to your senses. But that revelation right there, that revelation, we see how that Jesus' act saves us. But we also see why we needed to be saved. Because Adam's sin left us in an eternal, irreversible state of death. Only Jesus could remedy that for us. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.